because all that is going to do is provide Harry with material for Spare 2, the second book.
Harry and Meghan need to be associated with the real royals again. Nothing they're doing seems to work. And, Meghan, obviously failure after failure, but Harry, who wants to give his life to charity, unfortunately, he's not that smart.
Failure after failure. That's the phrase being used by someone who has spent years watching this couple's moves from both sides of the Atlantic. Someone with sources in different circles who has worked hard to stay balanced and measured in her views. When words like that come from careful analysis instead of personal dislike, they hit a lot harder. What those words point to is a moment that has been building for years and now appears impossible to ignore. King Charles seems to have reached a decision not through a major press conference, not through a dramatic public statement, and not through the kind of non-stop headlines that have often surrounded his youngest son and daughter-in-law. Instead, the decision appears to have been handled in the traditional royal style, quietly, firmly, and with little indication that there is room for debate. According to reports and commentary surrounding the situation, Meghan Markle's standing with the royal institution has reached a critical point. Many observers now believe the chapter is effectively closed and that previous efforts to repair relations have stalled. Today, we're looking at how this reported turning point was reached, what it could mean for the Sussex brand going forward, and why so many royal watchers believe attitudes behind palace walls have shifted so dramatically.
He's arrogant and he's lazy. He doesn't understand that actual charity takes work. And in order to get donations, you have to be actually associated with the royal family.
Despite months of stories about possible reconciliation, diplomatic outreach, and headlines suggesting a thaw in relations, reports indicate the palace has reached a much tougher position than many expected. According to royal commentator Paula Froelich, a source described as being close to palace circles delivered a message that was strikingly direct. These were not carefully polished talking points or the usual royal-style comments designed to hint at disappointment without saying too much. Instead, the remarks were described as unusually blunt, signaling just how serious the divide is believed to have become. The comments were described as direct, clear, and leaving little room for interpretation. According to the source cited in the report, the view was that no one ever wants to see Meghan again. Alongside that claim came another serious assessment: that Harry is viewed by some as no longer fully trusted. Those are strong conclusions, and their impact becomes even more significant when considered together. The point being made is not that one person is responsible while the other is simply caught in the middle. It is also not a case of one being seen as the main obstacle while the other escapes criticism.
Two of them, Harry and Meghan. Anything you tell them, anything that happens, they will twist it, and they will leverage it, and they will monetize it. That's why King Charles should not welcome Harry back into the royal fold.
According to the reporting and commentary surrounding the issue, both Meghan and Harry have faced growing skepticism from certain royal observers and individuals believed to be close to palace circles. In these accounts, Meghan is portrayed as someone whose relationship with the institution may be beyond repair, while Harry is described as facing continued doubts as long as his current approach remains unchanged. Whether those views are widely shared or not, they represent a much tougher tone than was often heard in previous years. Adding to the debate, Alison Boshoff, editor-at-large of the Daily Mail, reportedly told Paula Froelich that stories about a major reconciliation may have been exaggerated. According to that perspective, much of the optimism surrounding a possible reunion has been linked to Harry's side rather than to palace officials or King Charles's advisors. The suggestion is that certain stories and briefings reflected hopes and intentions rather than confirmed developments. In other words, what was presented as progress may, in some cases, have been more about expectations than reality. When you look at how the narrative has unfolded, the situation becomes even more interesting. Reports suggest that within media circles, including outlets that have heavily covered the so-called Project Thaw, there may be differing views about what is actually happening behind the scenes. That disagreement alone has become a major part of the story.
I do think he misses his dad. Yes, I think he looked at the video of William having the best time ever at the football game and probably ate him up inside with actual jealousy and longing for what could have been his life.
Richard Eden was advancing stories about possible reconciliation. Charlotte Griffith was reporting on Theo Reichert's reported diplomatic efforts. Then Alison Boshoff, the Daily Mail's editor-at-large, publicly argued that the entire reconciliation narrative was being overstated and largely driven by Harry's side. Those are not minor differences in interpretation. They suggest reporters were hearing very different versions of events from very different sources. The result was a confusing picture that raised even more questions. Small changes to headlines, reports being challenged, and pushback from people connected to key figures all pointed to one thing, even among those closely following royal developments. There was no clear agreement on what was actually happening behind the scenes. That uncertainty became a story in itself. According to commentators covering the situation, the palace appears to have taken note of a pattern that has been discussed for years. Critics have argued that private matters have repeatedly found their way into public interviews, books, documentaries, and media projects. Fair or not, that perception has played a major role in shaping attitudes toward future communication and trust.
However, he can't really go back. He needs to go back. Yes, he wants to see his dad, but the emotional blackmail that he pulled earlier this year, where he had his representatives say, Harry would not mind being invited. However, it's basically tied to who else was there and what could happen.
From that viewpoint, some royal observers believe the institution has reached a difficult conclusion. They argue there is concern that any attempt at private engagement could eventually become public discussion, creating risks the palace would rather avoid. Whether one agrees with that assessment or not, it has become a central theme in the debate surrounding Harry and Meghan. Before opinions appeared to harden this dramatically, reports suggested there was at least one more effort to explore a path forward. Enter Theo Reichert, a former diplomat who was recently appointed Deputy Private Secretary to King Charles. In royal circles, he has been described as highly capable, calm under pressure, politically savvy, and extremely well-connected. According to a Daily Mail report, Reichert was said to be interested in helping bridge the divide between Harry and William. Sources claimed he viewed the ongoing situation as effing ridiculous and believed some form of progress was needed.
Meghan was warmly welcomed in Britain, that everyone in the royal family tried their very, very hardest to make her feel at home and accommodate her, but that unfortunately Meghan only wanted to be the star and made it impossible for her and the royal family to collaborate.
It was a narrative that quickly grabbed attention because Reichert already had a strong reputation within royal and diplomatic circles. Reports credited him with helping coordinate major royal events and fostering productive relationships during important international engagements. He had also worked closely with senior members of the royal family on overseas matters. Some accounts even described him as one of the most respected figures working behind palace walls. If anyone was seen as capable of navigating such a complicated situation, many believed Reichert had the experience and connections to at least try. And then reality seemed to catch up with the story. The headline was quietly adjusted, and a question mark appeared where certainty had once been implied. In media terms, that can be a significant signal, suggesting there may be less confidence in the underlying claim than initially presented. Buckingham Palace chose not to comment, while a person said to be close to Theo Reichert reportedly pushed back on the reporting. According to those accounts, Reichert had never expressed the views that had been attributed to him. Suddenly, what had looked like a major breakthrough story appeared far less clear-cut than before. Meanwhile, reports continued to suggest that William's position had not meaningfully changed.
I think the Project Thaw is overstated and coming from Harry's side. I think it's another one of those things where Harry puts his wishes out in the media and hope it comes true. Absolutely. She compared it to the endless cycle of stories about Harry being welcome at Sandringham or hoping for an invitation, dispatches from a wish, not a reality.
According to royal commentators, he remains reluctant to engage in discussions about Harry through palace channels. If those reports are accurate, it highlights a deeper issue than public relations or diplomatic strategy could easily solve. That is because some divisions are not about messaging at all. They are about trust. And when trust is damaged over a long period of time, even the most skilled negotiators can find themselves facing an almost impossible challenge. Experience and connections can only go so far when the core issue runs much deeper. Paula Froelic's assessment attracted attention precisely because she is not known for making dramatic claims. Her argument was that Harry appears to miss important parts of his former life, his father, his home country, and the sense of belonging he once had within the royal world. Reports and commentary have suggested that moments such as seeing William relaxed and enjoying public events can serve as reminders of a life that now feels distant. For many observers, that aspect of the story is genuinely moving. It speaks to loss, change, and the consequences of major life decisions. Yet sympathy does not automatically alter reality. What someone hopes for and what is realistically possible are not always the same thing, especially after years of public disagreements and strained relationships.
When you are a royal, it is your connection to the crown that is what makes you shine in the international ecosphere. It's not necessarily you yourself, it's the crown that's the star. And when you leave that crown, a lot of its power and shine goes with you.
And we
Or
saw
goes
that.
back to the crown.
We saw that on the streets of Geneva.
Another major point in this debate comes from author Tom Bower's assessment. He has argued that Meghan was initially welcomed and given significant opportunities within the royal family. That view directly challenges a competing narrative that she faced resistance from the very beginning. Supporters and critics continue to disagree sharply on that question, but it remains one of the most fiercely debated aspects of the entire royal story. The key issue, according to that perspective, is not whether opportunities existed, but how those opportunities ultimately unfolded. According to critics of Meghan's approach to royal life, the central issue was never simply about joining the institution. It was about whether she was willing to accept everything that came with it. Those critics argue that royal life requires service, duty, and placing the interests of the institution above personal ambitions. In their view, tensions grew because there were different expectations about what that role should look like. From that perspective, the disagreement was not just about titles, residences, or public recognition. It was about the responsibilities attached to them. Commentators who take this view argue that when conflicts emerged, Meghan did not see certain institutional expectations as routine parts of royal life. Instead, they believe she viewed many of those expectations as unfair or overly restrictive, leading to an increasingly strained relationship. As the divide widened, public criticism, media interviews, and competing narratives made the situation even more difficult to manage. Royal observers have argued that the dispute evolved into something much larger than isolated disagreements. Over time, both sides appeared to become locked into very different interpretations of the same events, making meaningful reconciliation far more challenging. Hugo Vickers, a respected royal historian known for measured commentary, has discussed reports that Queen Elizabeth II took extra precautions during certain family interactions.
Every chance he's given, he F's it up in a massive way. And he does something bizarre, like tell his wife everything, tell Gayle King everything, go on ABC and talk about it. Or again, try to bully his father by announcing his wishes via the press, which BT dubs, he of course hates and continually sues.
According to accounts he referenced, the late Queen preferred to have trusted staff members present during some visits. Those reports have fueled ongoing debate about concerns over privacy and the handling of private family moments. For many royal watchers, that detail stands out because it raises larger questions about trust within the family. If senior royals felt the need to be especially cautious in private settings, critics argue that it helps explain why relationships became increasingly difficult to repair over time. That brings the focus back to King Charles. According to commentators following the situation, the King's current approach appears less driven by emotion and more by a long process of assessment and experience. Rather than acting out of anger, they suggest he has gradually reached conclusions based on years of public disputes, media controversies, and failed attempts to improve relations. From that viewpoint, the belief within some royal circles is that meaningful change is unlikely in the near future. As a result, any future contact or outreach may be approached with extreme caution, particularly if there are concerns that private interactions could once again become part of a larger public narrative. According to critics, the palace's concern is not simply about contact or communication, it is about what happens afterward. Their argument is that any interaction risks becoming part of a larger public story, discussed, analysed, and amplified far beyond the original moment. Whether that concern is fully justified or not, it has become a recurring theme in commentary surrounding the relationship between the Sussexes and the royal family. That brings us to a phrase that has surfaced repeatedly in these discussions. Dispatches from a wish, not a reality. The argument behind it is straightforward. Some commentators believe Harry still wants the Sussex brand to maintain a visible connection to the monarchy, not only because of personal ties, but because that connection remains central to public interest in their story. Supporters would argue the couple has built an independent path, while critics contend that royal links continue to be one of the strongest drivers of attention surrounding their projects. That debate sits at the heart of nearly every discussion about their future direction. Critics often point to a series of setbacks as evidence of larger challenges. Archewell attracted headlines when administrative issues temporarily affected its standing with California regulators before those matters were addressed. The Spotify partnership ended, while the Netflix deal has generated projects that received significant attention, but also sparked ongoing debate about their long-term impact and value. Questions have also been raised about the broader Sussex brand. Some observers argue that major business partnerships and celebrity alliances have not developed at the scale many expected when the couple first stepped away from royal duties. Whether fair or not, those perceptions continue to shape public discussion. Invictus remains a major part of Harry's public identity and is widely recognised for supporting wounded, injured, and sick service personnel and veterans. At the same time, reports have highlighted scrutiny surrounding certain financial matters, fundraising activities, and leadership changes within the organisation. Those developments have fueled additional media attention, although the charity continues its work and mission. Meanwhile, anniversary photographs and carefully timed media releases have become another point of debate. Critics argue that images from private events are sometimes later used as part of public storytelling and brand promotion. Supporters, on the other hand, view such releases as a normal way for public figures to share milestones with audiences. What is clear is that the royal connection remains a major source of public fascination, whether viewed as a personal legacy, a media asset, or simply an unavoidable part of their history. It continues to be one of the most talked about elements of the Sussex story and shows no sign of fading from the spotlight anytime soon. Still royals! According to critics, that remains the core attraction behind the Sussex brand. They argue that every report about a possible reconciliation, every headline about behind-the-scenes diplomacy, and every rumour about future meetings ultimately circles back to the same point: maintaining a visible connection to the royal family. From that perspective, stories about Project Thaw, discussions involving figures such as Theo Reichert, and speculation about future contact are viewed less as evidence of a breakthrough and more as reminders that the Sussexes remain linked to one of the most recognised families in the world. Supporters may disagree with that interpretation, but it continues to be a major theme among royal commentators. Those critics argue that the palace has now reached a point where it no longer wants to contribute to that cycle. In their view, royal officials have become increasingly cautious about providing opportunities that could reignite speculation, headlines, or renewed public debate. Whether accurate or not, that perception has gained momentum in recent months. Lost within all the politics, media coverage, and competing narratives is a more personal dimension to the story. By many accounts, Harry genuinely misses aspects of his former life and his relationships with family members. Commentators have often suggested that he looks at certain parts of his past with regret, wondering how events unfolded so differently from what he once expected. That element gives the story a more human side. Here is a man in his 40s, a military veteran and father of 2 young children, Archie and Lilibet, building a life in California while remaining physically and emotionally distant from much of the family he grew up with. For many observers, that reality adds a layer of sadness that cannot be ignored. At the same time, critics argue that Harry continues to rely heavily on public messaging, interviews, media statements, and reports from unnamed sources when discussing family matters. They contend that this approach has complicated efforts to rebuild trust and has often intensified existing tensions rather than reducing them. According to Paula Froelich and other commentators, this has created a difficult dynamic. The argument is that Harry is often portrayed as wanting reconciliation while also participating in a public conversation that makes reconciliation harder to achieve. Whether one agrees with that assessment or not, it highlights the central challenge facing all sides. Private family relationships are being discussed in a very public arena, and that reality continues to shape every development in the ongoing story. According to critics, one of the biggest obstacles to reconciliation is that every possible step forward appears to come with conditions attached. They argue that Harry wants contact with his father, but that broader concerns, including security, privacy, and public perception, continue to shape the conversation. Supporters would say those concerns are legitimate, while critics see them as barriers that make progress harder to achieve. The debate often centers on whether reconciliation can happen at all when both sides have very different expectations. Some commentators argue that wanting a renewed relationship while also maintaining specific requirements creates a difficult situation for everyone involved. Fair or not, that perception has become a recurring part of the public discussion. What appears increasingly clear from recent reporting is that many royal observers see a distinction between personal relationships and institutional relationships. Reports from journalists such as Richard Palmer, along with commentary from royal-focused outlets, have suggested that these two issues are being treated very differently behind the scenes. Under that interpretation, King Charles the father and King Charles the monarch are operating in separate lanes. As a father, there may always be a willingness to keep communication possible. As head of the institution, however, the calculations are much broader and involve protecting the monarchy's long-term interests, reputation, and stability. That distinction is important because it helps explain why speculation about family reunions has often failed to match reality. Richard Palmer reported in The Eye that there has been no discussion so far about a family reunion when Harry returns to Britain. That statement stood out because it was direct and left little room for misunderstanding. Similarly, some royal commentators have argued that while personal reconciliation should never be ruled out completely, institutional reintegration is viewed as a far more complicated matter. In their view, those are two very different conversations with very different outcomes. If Harry attends future events in Britain, critics argue that he is more likely to do so as a private individual than as someone returning to an active royal role. That possibility has fueled continued debate about what his future relationship with the monarchy could realistically look like. At the centre of it all is King Charles himself. By most accounts, he remains both a father and a monarch, and those responsibilities do not always point in the same direction. Many commentators believe that personal affection and family ties still exist, even amid years of tension. At the same time, they argue that the institution has faced repeated challenges and controversies connected to the Sussex saga, leading palace figures to adopt a more cautious approach moving forward. Whether one agrees with that assessment or not, it remains a key factor in understanding the current state of relations. For many royal watchers, King Charles remains a figure carrying an extraordinary number of responsibilities at once. He has continued with major public duties, represented the country at important events, and managed the demands of a new reign while also dealing with serious health challenges. At the same time, commentators often point to the personal strain created by the ongoing distance between him and his youngest son. That combination of public duty and private difficulty has become a major part of the narrative surrounding the king. Supporters frequently highlight his determination to continue working despite immense pressures, describing it as a sign of commitment and resilience during a particularly demanding period. Some commentators argue that one of the most painful aspects of the situation is the question of motivation. They suggest there is a difference between seeking reconciliation for personal and emotional reasons versus seeking it because of public image, strategic considerations, or brand value. Whether that assessment is fair or not, it has become a recurring theme in discussions about the Sussexes and the royal family. Critics of the Sussex strategy have gone even further, arguing that many of the couple's post-royal ventures have struggled to meet the enormous expectations that surrounded them when they first stepped away from official duties. They point to mixed business results, changing media partnerships, and ongoing public debates as evidence that the path has been far more complicated than initially predicted. According to those critics, public audiences, corporate partners, and institutions tend to respond best when they perceive authenticity and consistency. Their argument is that projects gain lasting support when people believe in the message behind them, not simply the attention surrounding them. That perception has shaped much of the conversation over the last several years. The release of anniversary and wedding photographs has also sparked debate. Some observers have closely analysed what was included and what was absent, searching for clues about relationships, priorities, and public messaging. Whether those interpretations are accurate or not, the images became another source of speculation and commentary. For some royal analysts, the larger takeaway is not about any single photograph or event. Instead, they see it as part of a broader story about belonging, identity, and expectations. Meghan entered royal life at a moment of enormous public goodwill and global attention, yet critics argue that beneath the celebrations and headlines were deeper challenges that would eventually become impossible to ignore. In their view, the years that followed did not create those tensions, they simply made them more visible to the world. Looking ahead, attention will inevitably turn to Harry's future visits to Britain, including his involvement with the Invictus Games. Whether any private meeting with King Charles takes place remains uncertain. A conversation, a brief encounter, or even a quietly arranged meeting away from public view is still within the realm of possibility. After all, many commentators have noted that Charles is not generally viewed as a man who holds grudges forever. What recent reporting has changed, according to royal observers, is the broader context surrounding any potential reunion. Even if personal contact occurs, expectations about what it might mean have become far more restrained than they were in previous years. The focus is no longer on dramatic reconciliations or grand returns, but on the reality of where relationships currently stand. Critics argue that Harry would now be returning to Britain under very different circumstances than those imagined in many earlier headlines. They contend that trust issues, public disputes, and years of tension have fundamentally altered how future interactions are viewed by those around the institution. Whether that assessment is accurate or not, it has become a dominant theme in recent royal commentary. Meanwhile, the monarchy itself continues to move forward with its responsibilities. King Charles, Prince William, and Catherine remain focused on public duties, charitable work, and the ongoing demands of royal life. Catherine's return to public engagements has drawn widespread attention, while William continues to take on an increasingly prominent role within the institution. The next generation is also growing into the spotlight. Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis are gradually becoming more visible as they mature, representing what many supporters see as the future of the monarchy. Their development, alongside the broader work of the royal family, reinforces the message that the institution is focused on long-term continuity and stability. For many observers, that is the larger story. While debates about Harry and Meghan continue to generate headlines, the monarchy's day-to-day work carries on regardless. The institution adapts, evolves, and keeps moving forward. As for Meghan, critics argue that her departure from royal life ultimately led her down a very different path than the one many expected when she first joined the family. Supporters see independence and self-determination. Critics see missed opportunities and ongoing controversy. Either way, the outcome remains one of the most discussed and divisive chapters in modern royal history, and the debate shows no sign of ending anytime soon. For many royal observers, one lesson stands out above all else. The crown itself is the enduring symbol, not any single person connected to it. The monarchy has survived generations of change because its strength comes from the institution, its traditions, and its role in public life, rather than from any one individual. That reality has been demonstrated time and again throughout royal history. Critics of Harry and Meghan's departure argue that stepping away from royal duties meant stepping away from the influence and prestige that naturally come from being part of the working monarchy. In their view, while personal fame and media attention can continue independently, the unique power associated with the institution remains with the institution itself. That idea sits at the centre of much of the debate surrounding the Sussex story. Supporters see a couple pursuing independence and building a life on their own terms. Critics see people discovering that royal status and public influence are not always transferable once official roles are left behind. Before we wrap up, there's an important question worth considering. Do you think King Charles made the right decision not as a monarch, not as a political figure, but as a father? Was there another path he could have taken, or was this outcome always likely given everything that has happened over the last several years? And here's another question that continues to spark discussion. When you look back at those wedding photographs and the images that have resurfaced since, what stands out most to you? Sometimes the details people notice say just as much as the photographs themselves. When you look at those photographs now, with everything that has happened since, what do you see? Do they make you feel sadness for what might have been, for a story that seemed full of promise but took a very different turn? Or do they strike you as something else entirely, evidence that things were never quite as perfect as they appeared on the surface? It's a fascinating question, and it's one I'd love to hear your thoughts on in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching and spending your time here today. This community continues to be one of the best parts of the channel, and the discussions you bring to every video make these conversations worth having. If you enjoyed this video or found it thought-provoking, please give it a like. It really helps support the channel and reach more viewers. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. Turn on the notification bell so you never miss an update, and share this video with someone who follows the royal story as closely as you do. And before you go, drop a comment below and let me know your thoughts. I'm looking forward to reading them.